The dusty sun of the Wild West bled across the horizon, painting the skies in shades of crimson and gold as the lonely cowboy named. Eli Morgan rode into the small frontier town of Dry Creek, a place where saloons buzzed with laughter, whiskey and dangerous bets, and where fortune could change in the turn of a card or the roll of a dice. And Eli, a man whose life had always been shadowed by solitude, whose heart carried scars as deep as the canyons he had roamed, found himself at the wooden swinging doors of the Silver Spur Saloon, boots coated in dirt, hat tilted low, and a spirit that sought nothing more than distraction. From the gnawing ache of loneliness, he had no kin left, no lover waiting, and no ranch to call his own, only his horse and the open road. But fate has a way of testing men when they least expect it. And that night, fate took the form of a high-stakes poker game with men whose eyes gleamed with greed and lips curled with smirks of arrogance. Eli was not reckless, but neither was he a coward, and when the cards were dealt, he held his nerve, whiskey burning his throat as the bets climbed higher, coins clattering on the table, spurs jangling with every step of men crowding around. Yet what started as a simple game grew into something far more dangerous, the final pot swelling with not just gold, but pride, honor, and dares that cut deeper than money. And when Eli lost that last hand, silence fell over the room, his heart pounding like war drums. The winner, a stout rancher with eyes as sharp as broken glass, leaned forward and, with a grin that could slice through steel, said, "The bet was clear, Morgan. You lose. You take the deal." And the deal, to Eli's horror and confusion, was unlike anything he had ever heard. For the men had joked that if Eli lost, he'd have to marry one of the mountain natives, a giant woman known for her towering frame, powerful build and fierce spirit, a woman the townsfolk whispered about as if she were a myth, a woman who had sent fear into the bravest. Men yet carried herself with grace beyond compare, and though Eli had thought it was nothing but jest, the crowd cheered, slamming mugs on the table, sealing the cruel bet, and suddenly his fate was tied to hers, the giant native woman they called Tala, daughter of the chief of the Redwood tribe, known not only for her strength, but for her wisdom. Her laughter like thunder rolling through the valley, her presence so commanding that men shrank in her shadow. And yet she was untouched, unwed, her tribe protective of her heart. But now, through the folly of cards and pride, Eli Morgan, the lonely cowboy who had never believed love could find him, was to be her husband. His chest burned with humiliation as the saloon roared with laughter, some mocking, some pitying. Yet as he stumbled out into the cool night air, the stars sharp above him, he wondered if perhaps fate was not mocking him, but guiding him, though the thought seemed as wild as the coyotes howling. In the distance the following day, the townsfolk gathered at the edge of the valley to see the impossible union, the small cowboy and the giant native, a sight that would echo through whispers for generations. Tala arrived on horseback, her frame towering, her hair braided with eagle feathers, her eyes dark as onyx and filled with fire, and when she dismounted, the ground seemed to tremble beneath her steps. She looked at Eli not with scorn, but with curiosity, as if studying a man carved from a different world. And though she could have refused, her tribe believed in honoring agreements, even foolish ones, and so the chief declared the marriage binding. Eli's voice trembled as he gave his vow, the words catching in his throat. But Tala's voice rang clear, steady, and powerful. "I honor the path chosen by fate," she said, her gaze piercing his soul, and in that moment the laughter of the crowd faded. For something unspoken passed between them, something neither of them understood yet. In the days that followed, Eli's life transformed in ways he could never have predicted. For though he had expected scorn, ridicule, and hardship, he discovered that Tala was unlike anyone he had ever known. She carried her strength with humility. Her laughter warmed the cold edges of his loneliness, and when she walked beside him, the world seemed smaller, safer, brighter. At first he stumbled, embarrassed by her height, her strength, her confidence, but soon he began to see what others had failed to see, that Beneath her towering presence was a woman of kindness, courage, and a heart as vast as the plains. She taught him the ways of her people, the songs sung to the moon, the meaning of the rivers, the patience of the hunt, and he taught her the ways of the cowboy, how to rope, how to ride the western trails, how to draw laughter out of hardship. And slowly, the walls of awkwardness crumbled, leaving only a bond forged in fire and fate. Still, challenges loomed, for the town sneered at him, mocking him for being the small man beside the giant woman. But Eli, for the first time in his life, found himself standing taller, not in body but in spirit. And when he looked at Tala, he felt something stir that he had thought lost forever. Hope, love, belonging. And though chapter 1 of their story was only the beginning, it was already clear that this forced marriage, born of a reckless bet, might not be a curse at all, but the greatest blessing of his life. And as their story unfolds, we invite you, dear viewer, to walk this journey with us, to feel the power of love where the world sees only differences, to witness the strength of destiny where others see folly. So stay with us, subscribe to our channel, and let this story continue to wrap its spell around your heart, because what comes next will be even more powerful, and you will not want to miss the fire that chapter 2 will bring. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, and Eli Morgan, once the lonely cowboy mocked for losing a foolish bet, found himself awakening each morning beside Tala, the towering native woman whose presence had begun to reshape not only his life but his soul. And though the townsfolk still whispered and laughed, their laughter no longer cut him as it once had, for every time he looked into Tala's eyes, deep and steady as rivers that had run for centuries, he saw something no man could mock. He saw home, he saw truth, he saw love blooming in a way that neither of them had expected. Their marriage had been born of ridicule, sealed by chance, yet within that union lay a strength greater than gold or land. And as Eli worked beside Tala, tending the horses, building a cabin at the edge of her tribe's land, he found himself thriving in ways he never had before, for he was no longer the lonely wanderer drifting from saloon to saloon, but a man with purpose, a man with a partner. And though the contrast between them was stark, his lean frame beside her towering figure, his soft-spoken words beside her commanding voice, they fit together like pieces of a puzzle, shaped by fate's hand. Still, life in the frontier was never without its trials, and soon the true test of their bond came in the form of danger, for rival settlers and outlaws had begun encroaching upon Tala's tribe's hunting grounds, bringing with them greed, steel and fire. And one night, under the glow of a restless moon, Eli and Tala found themselves standing side by side as smoke rose from the horizon, warning of raiders drawing near. The tribe prepared for battle, spears glinting, bows strung, and though Eli was an outsider, he took up his rifle, his heart pounding, for he could not allow harm to come to the people who had embraced him, nor to the woman who had become his very breath. The raiders came like wolves, snarling, shouting, guns flashing, and in that chaos, Eli saw the true power of Tala, her frame cutting through the smoke like a goddess of war, her strength unmatched as she shielded the children, rallied her people, and fought with a ferocity that left even hardened men trembling. But Eli too fought with courage, not the brute strength of Tala, but with cunning, precision, and a heart fueled by love. Together they became a force the raiders had not expected, a storm of fire and spirit, and when the dust cleared, the tribe stood victorious, their enemies driven back, their land protected, and for the first time, the townsfolk who had come to mock Eli now saw him in a different light, not as the small man chained to a giant wife, but as the cowboy who had stood beside her, a partner worthy of her strength. And though they would never admit it openly, respect began to grow where ridicule once thrived. In the quiet after the battle, Eli and Tala sat by the river, the stars mirrored in the water, and Eli, with hands calloused from work and battle, reached for hers, dwarfed in size, yet holding all the tenderness of his heart. "I thought I was cursed the night I